thoughts that there is no life on Mars are unfounded. The planet's actual name is Barsum, and life exists there, albeit in a state of terminal decline. The predator metropolis, Zodanga, relentlessly obliterating its surroundings and sapping the vitality from Barsum. Only the enormous metropolis of Helium is putting up a valiant fight, going airship against airship for a millennium. One day, when the airships are engaged in a bloody struggle, a peculiar blue ray of energy suddenly kills all save Sabdance, the Zodanga ruler's ship. When Sab then tries to attack the Therns, he is blown back. 3 individuals known as Therns, led by Shang, visit Sab then and give him a curious blue mesh device that enables him to fire energy bolts. The Therns explain that they are the goddess's emissaries and that she has decided to aid Sab then in his conflict. When Shang orders him to try out his new abilities, Sab then starts firing energy bolts at all the opposing spacecraft, easily winning the conflict. On Earth, in the year 1881, John notices a shadowy figure following him as he moves through the streets of New York and makes every effort to elude him. He then makes a pit stop at a store to send an express telegram since it is essential. Later, Ned receives the message from his uncle urging him to act quickly to save him. Ned arrives at John's home after riding the train, where he meets with a lawyer who explains that John passed away suddenly and left everything to Ned. His remains were buried in a crypt that could only be accessed from the inside. Additionally, John has left a long-ago journal with the explicit direction that only John is permitted to read it. Ned continues reading the narrative that began 13 years ago after the attorney departs. John, a prominent former Confederate Army captain, is looking for gold in Arizona after the Civil War, though he hasn't discovered anything thus yet. The customers of the pub attempt to eject him after the local bartender has already cut him off for not paying his debt, but John beats them off and knocks them unconscious before pointing his gun at the bartender. When a group of soldiers arrive to capture John at that time, he tries to fight them off but is ultimately knocked unconscious and subsequently awakened for questioning. John keeps attempting to create a fight after waking up in front of Colonel Powell, and doesn't stop until he is put in a cell. Powell wants John to fight with them against the Apaches, but John is tired of fighting and is unwilling to do so. Powell responds by knocking him out once more, and John wakes up thinking about his deceased family for a few hours. When John awakens, he pees in the cell to attract the guard's attention. He then knocks the guard out and steals his keys before fleeing on Powell's horse. As the cavalry closes up on him, they discover him conversing to an Apache war band that is mounted. Both parties are armed and suspicious, and a gunfight that takes place in several different languages leads to an altercation. John takes advantage of the chance to run away, but when Powell is hurt, John chooses to assist him. The two escape down the canyon and arrive upon a small cave. The Apaches who were pursuing them halt when they spot a sign on a rock above the cave, at which point they retreat. John investigates the sign out of curiosity, and finds the spider emblem that he has been seeing while looking for gold. Powell is left behind as John explores farther and comes upon a chamber with odd symbols and gold-lined walls. A Thern suddenly emerges behind him and attacks, but after exchanging blows, John shoots him and observes the Thern is holding a luminous necklace. John hears the dying guy muttering a few words, repeats them as he snatches the necklace, and as a result, he unexpectedly teleports out of the cave. John is currently in the midst of an unfamiliar desert. He attempts to stand up, but it takes him several tries since walking is so difficult. John discovers that his walking is startlingly almost weightless, and after tossing the pendant away in irritation, he starts moving normally. He then notices that his leaps now cover considerable ground. He is unaware that he is on Mars, where the reduced gravity makes it possible for him to perform these actions. After that, John climbs a hill and finds a clutch of eggs that are maturing into green, six-limbed babies. A swarm of Tharks with weapons and riding enormous animals approaches at that same time. As the others start firing, the leader Tarkas grabs the necklace and charges John, but John jumps away to safety. Awed by such prowess, Tarkas commands an end to the gunfire and reapproaches John, this time demonstrating that he does so in peace. They make an effort to converse, but the language barrier leads Tarkas to believe that John is from Virginia. John tries to take Tarkas' weapons in response to Tarkas' request to see the jump again. However, the Tharks launched a swift counterattack and overcame him, capturing him and bringing the infants back to their clan. Princess Dija is getting ready to give a speech on her most recent invention in helium. Her father, King Tardos, and his council, who are debating Zodanga's most recent attacks with a new luminous weapon, abruptly stop her. Dija interrupts and says she has created a device she calls the ninth ray that can capture the blue light. She tries to explain how it works, but while she does, a council member discreetly touches it and zaps it to destroy the illusion that Dija failed. Dija is extremely unhappy when Tardos sends his council away and tells her that the only way to end the conflict is to wed Sabdan. The council member who destroyed the machine outside reveals his true identity. It is Thurn, who is spying by utilizing his shape-shifting abilities. The monarch dismisses her pleadings and instructs his subjects to begin planning the wedding. Coming back to John, he finds it fascinating to observe the Tharks in the city, especially when they begin squabbling over the infants. While Haegis attempts to kill John, Tarkas orders them to let a girl named Sola to have a hatchling for herself. However, Tarkas quickly forces Haegis away because he has no support. Tarkas then commands John to leap, but John still refuses, so he is taken to a cave with the hatchlings and tied up. John is able to grasp Sola's language when they have a special drink, but he eventually passes out. When John awakens in the middle of the night once more, he is startled to encounter Wula, an extraterrestrial dog-like creature that rapidly becomes his companion. Then John gets to escape while struggling with the shackles, but Wula pursues him. Whatever distance John travels, Wula quickly resurfaces at his side. John follows some noises in his desperate search for the necklace and discovers a Thark party that Wula disrupts. When the Tharks start attacking it, John leaps into the melee to dissuade them, accidentally murdering a Thark while doing so. He is quickly knocked to the ground by the Tharks, and when John demonstrates a command of their language, everyone understands Sola has been interfering. The following time, Sola will be murdered since her skin won't allow for any more markings, Tarkas says as John is chained to a rock and forced to see the punishment for her error. John feels reminded of his family when he hears this. The Tharks are startled to see battleships engaged in combat in the sky, so they flee for safety so they may see the conflict securely. Sab then uses his abilities to assault and board the enemy spacecraft in the skies, but Dija poses as a soldier and tries to direct the ship away. Dijan nearly falls and hangs on the edge when the ship is attacked and loses control. When John sees her, he assumes she is human and utilizes a long leap to save her. As the ships touch down, John orders Dija to back off and let him fight, but she soon proves to be a fighter as well, and the two of them team up to battle warriors from both armies. John leaps onto one of the ships and fires at the other ships with the cannon, causing them to collapse. Then Sab then pursues John, and the two get into a violent brawl that Sab then easily wins. The Tharks start shooting at the ships as John is about to be killed, allowing him to flee as the last few ships manage to escape. After that, the Tharks adopt John as one of their own warriors and give him his right arms, which infuriates Haegis. John wants to decline since he doesn't want to engage in combat, but when Tarkas threatens Dija, John is compelled to accept. The Tharks then proceed to plunder the stricken ships while Dija expresses interest in John's talent. She requests that he instruct her employees in it, but he reminds her that he is not a hired gun. John doesn't aware he's on Mars until Dija casually comments the planet's lack of oceans, at which point the two of them share their knowledge. Dija isn't sure whether she believes him, and when John says the pendant led him here, Dija starts to wonder if he could be a Thurn. Dija accompanies John to the temple of the goddess in search of answers, despite Sola's warning that entry is prohibited. As recompense for John saving her, Dija deciphers certain symbols that refer to a gate and pledges to accompany him there so he can return to Earth. Sadly, Tarkas and his soldiers interrupt them and arrest them for breaching the rules. Sola will perish, and Tarkas is enraged with John for putting her in danger. John then understands Sola is Tarkas' daughter. Before bringing the trio to his tent and acting as though he will punish them, Tarkas spanks him for it, and adds that the Tharks have no idea of personal offspring. Tarkas, however, hands the pendant back to them and orders them to go. When Haegis approaches the tent out of suspicion, the trio has already left, and Tarkas is being accused of betraying them. John is astounded at the extent of Sab-Vent's destruction as the trio rides through Mars with Wula trailing them. A few days later, Sola discovers Dija isn't guiding them to the gate when they had to navigate fierce sandstorms and hide from the battleships. John becomes enraged when Dija admits she's sending them to Helium so they may aid her people, and he decides to leave her behind. Dija begs and pleads, getting down on her knees and confessing that the gate doesn't exist while also explaining that she is a princess who doesn't want to sacrifice her freedom to the enemy. John returns her, but he is still convinced that the cave that led him here is genuine. As Dija's whereabouts become known, Shang formulates a strategy to track her down. The group eventually arrives at a river used for pilgrimage, where those who have sinned drown themselves to reach paradise. John forbids Sola from joining them, telling her that in order to respect her father, she must carry out his instructions and support him. A strange edifice that Dija has never seen before is finally found by the group as they travel downstream on a boat, leaving Wula behind. The necklace starts to light as John lifts her to the top of it and activates the entire structure, proving that they are machines. The two enter through a hole that appears, and Dija uses the necklace to activate a schematic of the solar system once they are inside. The blue light, which resembles the spider John saw in the cave, is the 9th ray she has been investigating. John's presence here is actually a result of a copy of him traveling from Earth to Mars, it turns out. Dija ultimately accepts that John is from Earth after realizing that Sab then is receiving assistance from the Therns. She has to take John back to Helium so she may continue researching this, and in order to persuade him, she gives him a kiss while evoking memories of John's deceased wife. At that point, Shang poses as one of the Tharks and an army of them come. John grabs Dija right away, and the two of them return to the boat to set sail and find Wula. The Tharks start after them right away, and John starts to recall the moment he came home to discover his house demolished and his family dead. John orders the girl to go and remains behind to battle with Wula's assistance since he doesn't want to lose any more people. A fierce struggle breaks out, and John manages to gain the upper hand by decimating soldiers around, fueled by the sorrow of his family. However, a helium spacecraft shows up right then and ends the conflict. When Tardos and his daughter are reunited, Sab then, who appears to have arrived peacefully and is solely concerned about the princess, admits they are together. He offers Dija his sword as evidence, and despite her best efforts to murder him, she ultimately agrees to the marriage for the benefit of her people. Wula and Sola were discovered to have been sheltering beneath soil as the ship whisks everyone away, including John. John awakens hours later in a luxurious chamber full with Zodangan guards. One of Dija's troops shows up out of the blue and instructs him to pose as though they are holding him prisoner. After defeating a few guards, John cooperates, and when they reach the outside, the guard instructs him to leap into a certain tower. Once the pair is by themselves in Dija's chamber, she asks John to defend her people. When John replies, "No," Dija hands him the pendant back and explains how to utilize it. When John starts to repeat the words, the guards enter the room abruptly. Dija looks back and sees John gone. She assumes he went home and departs. However, John is skulking in the ceiling, and as he attempts to flee down a hallway, a disguised Shang stops him. Before changing into a new disguise and taking John away in a carriage so they may go witness the wedding procession, Shang confesses that he knows a lot about Earth. After it is made clear that Dija would pass away after the wedding, Shang reveals that Therns are ancient, immortal beings that live on numerous worlds, including Earth, and that they always have the power to shape history. John is taken to a hangar by Shang with the intention of flying him away, but Wula appears and bites Shang, releasing John. After snatching the pendant back, John takes a light flyer and starts to pilot it awkwardly, nearly crashing many times. A guard is after him, but when he escapes the city, Sola kills the pursuer, and John crashes to the ground. John must return to the Tharks for assistance since he can't save Dija by himself. Although Sola claims that her people cannot fly, John coerces her into traveling with him. They are detained as soon as they enter the village since Hages is now an authority. They find Tarkas has been imprisoned as well as they are placed in a cell. Tarkas is enraged to hear Sola return, but he lacks the energy to murder John because he was defeated in a Colosseum combat. Soon after, two enormous white apes are forced to fight John and Tarkas in the Colosseum. Sola, who can't endure to see a carnage, joins in and rushes to her father's side. Because he is chained, John is unable to jump away, but after escaping many attacks from the gorillas, he succeeds in releasing the chain and uses the rock at the end to kill one of the animals. When the second ape jumped on him, John instantly killed it, garnering the adoration of the audience. He then picked up a sword off the ground. After that, John challenges Hages, who tries to decline but is reminded of the rules by the audience. Hages leaps to attack, but John quickly chops off his head. Everyone congratulates him on his triumph, and when he makes a speech about how the world needs warriors to be saved, the audience is eager to fight with him. John leads the Tharks to Zodanga as the wedding ceremony begins, only to discover that the city is deserted since the wedding is actually taking place in Helium. John receives a smack from Tarkas for his error, who also points out that his people cannot fly and that they cannot arrive in time. John boards a light flyer alone and departs disappointed. Soon after, John enters helium without incident owing to the light flyer's ability to make him appear local. John breaks through the window just as Dija is ready to wed Sab, then stopping the ceremony. As soon as possible, Sab then sends a signal to summon his soldiers and flees, taking Dija after him. Dija slaps Sab then to make him drop her so John may save her, while a furious conflict between Zodigans and Heliumites breaks out in the streets and the temple. The pair then enters the conflict, and John engages Sab then in hand-to-hand combat. The evil guy appears to be set to win their battle when all of a sudden, a spacecraft slams into the temple, showing that the Tharks have finally agreed to be able to fly. Together, the Tharks and the Heliumites can finally defeat the Zodigans as John leaps upon Sab then, seizes his arm, and demands knowledge. The blue light, however, returns to Sab's body and kills him before he can speak. At the same time, it starts to have an impact on John. Sean, who is impersonating a Thark close by, was attempting to control the light when Dija's sword cut him off. When Jonah approaches them, Sean assumes the identity of Dija to divert her, and when she does, the real Dija takes advantage of the opportunity to shove Sean away and flee out the window. When Tarkus picks up the necklace from the ground, John attempts to ask for it, but just then the real John emerges, and he and Tarkus attack the changed Sean, who then vanishes. Everyone rejoices at the conclusion of the conflict and the restoration of peace. Given that everything is set up for a wedding, John removes his previous wedding band and asks Dija to marry him. When Dija accepts, the mob throws a party to celebrate. After the wedding, John goes up to the balcony for some fresh air and discards the pendant, acknowledging that he is now John from Mars. He comes upon a guard out of the blue who turns out to be Sean, who touches John and instantly brings him back to Earth. When John awakens in the cave, Powell has already died away and a long time has passed. He attempts to use the phrases written on the spider on the rock, but they are ineffective. Ned completes reading the tale while still in the present. John had spent years searching for a new necklace that would allow him to return to Mars. After much effort, he discovered one in the Orkney Islands, but he was aware that the Therns were still secretly pursuing him. In order to get his body transported to the crypt, he feigned to be sick and used a specific poison to make it appear dead. He left precise instructions so that only Ned would know the truth. Ned runs to the crypt, shocked and frightened, and uses the telegram's keywords to reopen it only to discover that it is empty. A Thern materializes behind him at that precise moment, but is dispatched with a shot before he can attack. Then John emerges from concealment and reveals that while he had been using Ned as a piece of bait to capture the Thern, the rest of the plan remained the same. He would grab a necklace from the Thern and ask Ned to guard his body before going into the tomb and permanently sealing it. John then pronounces the command to finally go back to Mars.